Dan, we are in a decidedly bearish oil price environment. We saw prices down about 20% in Q3. Was it right for OPEC to delay this December output hike?
I think they're being very realistic and paying attention to what the supply demand, and they see that it's an oversupplied market, and the perennial, or now the extended question about when is the Chinese economy going to come back and when is the Chinese stimulus really going to go to work. So I think what they're saying is we're going to wait until we see some signs that the market is ready to absorb some more oil.
How do you see OPEC policy and prices evolving from here? You said there's some concern around China. Obviously, the supply side a major issue at the moment. What happens next?
Well, I think it's basically the question about demand. U.S. supply continues to build up. By the end of this year, the U.S. will be at 13.5 million barrels a day, meaning several million barrels a day ahead of the other big producers. So the supply continues to come on. But I think the big question that hangs over the market is demand, because traditionally China has been the source of half of the growth in the oil demand, and a slowing China doesn't register in the same way in the oil market.
So in your view, how soon before we see some of that China stimulus filtering into the economy and actually filtering into global oil demand, if that's a key issue for the market right now?
Well, I think it's going to be several months, and it does seem that the Chinese have gone through a process of deciding, oh, we've done this, not enough, we have to do more, and a change from where it was even a few months ago. They realize that they need to step on it for their economy.
Dan, we are on the cusp of an historic election in the United States. As you assess the energy policies of both of these candidates, who do you think is better for the industry, Trump or Harris?
Well, I think that in terms of, it depends. Actually, the U.S. oil production has grown more under the Biden administration than under the Trump administration, although it's grown a lot by several million barrels under both of them. But I think the question will be about regulation and restrictions, and I think clearly the Trump administration would not be using regulations in the way that the Biden administration did. And Harris, one big question is what happens to this pause on LNG, expansions of LNG. It's supposed to be decided before a new administration takes over, whoever it is. But it's really the area of regulation you'd see the big difference.
And Donald Trump has promised a regulatory bonfire of sorts if he is successful this week. He wants to essentially cut back the Inflation Reduction Act. He wants to pull out of the Paris Agreement. He wants to unleash American energy. What are the consequences on the regulatory side?
I think American energy is pretty unleashed in terms of the growth we've seen. I think the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a lot of support in red states and Republican states for it, and industries. So I think that under Trump, a substantial part of it would remain. It might be renamed with some other name, and Trump is quite conscious that the vote that put it over was the vote of the vice president when it was tied in the Senate. Clearly, he will be opposed to the Paris Agreement, and we might see a repetition of what we saw before, a withdrawal from that. So in that area, that would be a significant area on climate.